The streets of Siena were eerily quiet that evening, the kind of silence that felt heavy, as if the world was holding its breath. I had just stepped out of my small apartment, ready for a stroll to clear my mind after a long day at the lab, when the lights flickered out, plunging the town into an inky darkness. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and I instinctively reached for my phone, its glow the only beacon in the oppressive blackness. "Alessandra! Are you there?" I heard a voice call out, cutting through the silence. It was Marco, my neighbor. "Did the power go out for you too?" "Yes," I replied, trying to mask the unease in my voice. "It's more than just a blackout. Something feels off." Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of movement in the shadows, something that did not belong. My heart raced as I squinted into the darkness, trying to discern what it was. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "What?" Marco asked, his tone shifting from casual to apprehensive. "There was something. A figure," I stammered, my instinct screaming at me to run. Before I could react, a piercing scream echoed from a few blocks away, sending adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Stay close!" I commanded, gripping Marco's arm. We moved cautiously toward the source of the noise, but as we turned a corner, the streetlights flickered back to life, illuminating the scene. To our horror, we saw residents huddled together, their faces pale with fear, pointing at the shadows that seemed to writhe and twist just beyond the light's reach. I could hear hushed whispers among the crowd, tales of shadowy beings that had emerged during the blackout. "They're coming for us," an elderly woman murmured, her hands trembling. "They feed on fear." I felt a chill settle in my bones, a mixture of fear and curiosity igniting my scientific mind. I needed to understand what was happening. "We have to report this," I said firmly, turning to Marco. "There's no way this is a simple power outage." Meanwhile, across town, Captain Luca Moretti sat in a dimly lit military command center, poring over reports of chaos spreading through the region. "This isn't just a blackout," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "We're dealing with something unprecedented." He glanced at the officials around him, their faces grave. "I need a team. We have to contain this situation before it escalates." "Luca, are you sure?" one of the officials asked, concern etched on his face. "We don't even know what we're dealing with." "I know enough," Luca replied, determination sharpening his features. "We can't let fear take hold. We must act now." As I made my way to the local university to gather equipment for analysis, I had no idea that our paths would soon cross, and the truth behind the shadows would plunge us into a world of chaos and revelation. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead in the command center, casting an artificial glare on the faces gathered around the table. As I stepped into the room, I immediately felt the weight of anxious eyes on me, and my heart raced. I was here to provide answers, but uncertainty gnawed at the edges of my thoughts. "Dr. Alessandro Romano," I introduced myself, extending a hand to the serious-looking man at the head of the table. "Captain Luca Moretti." "I've heard about your work," he replied, his grip firm but his eyes skeptical. "But we don't have time for theories. We need action." "You think I'm here to theorize while shadows wreak havoc outside?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling over. "I'm here to find a solution, but I need to understand what we're dealing with first." Luca frowned, his jaw tightening. "We've already lost too many lives. We need to contain this threat immediately, even if it means taking risks." "Risks without understanding could lead to more chaos," I countered, trying to keep my voice steady. "If we don't know where these shadows come from, how can we predict their behavior?" "Then we'll have to figure it out on the fly," he said, crossing his arms. The tension was palpable, each of us unwilling to back down. The door swung open, interrupting our standoff as a soldier rushed in, breathless. "We've got a situation. A group of civilians just reported an attack." Before he could finish, Luca was already moving, motioning for his team to follow. "We need to assess the situation. Alessandra, you're coming with me." I hesitated but followed him out into the chaos of Florence. The streets were filled with panic, and as we approached the scene, I could see the remnants of what had just occurred. Shadows flickered in the corners of my vision, darting away from the light. "There!" Luca shouted, pointing as a shadowy figure lunged at a group of terrified people. My heart raced. I could see it, a dark silhouette, indistinct yet horrifying. It moved with a fluid grace, a predator among the prey. "Stop!" Luca commanded, signaling his team to intervene. They rushed forward, weapons drawn, but the shadow slipped through their grasp like smoke, leaving only fear in its wake. "What was that?" I gasped, my mind racing. "Did you see how it moved?" "I don't care how it moves. I care that it's out there," he replied tersely, scanning the area for any signs of the entity. "We need to get these people to safety." Back at the command center, the atmosphere had shifted. Political leaders were demanding answers, impatience crackling in the air. "We need results, Moretti," one of them shouted. I could feel the pressure mounting, but I knew we were still in the dark. As I sifted through the evidence collected from the scene, something caught my eye, a peculiar artifact, half buried in debris. I picked it up, feeling a strange energy pulsing through it. "Luca, look at this," I said, holding it up. His gaze shifted to the artifact, curiosity momentarily outweighing his frustration. "What is it?" "I'm not sure yet, but it might be connected to the shadows," I replied, my pulse quickening as I examined the intricate designs etched into its surface. "We need to analyze it further. It could be the key to understanding what these beings are and why they're attacking." Luca nodded, the urgency in his expression returning. "Then let's get to work. We don't have much time." As we prepared to delve deeper into this mystery, I couldn't shake the feeling that our discoveries would not only change the course of this crisis but also unravel the threads of our own pasts, intertwining our fates in ways we hadn't yet begun to comprehend. As I stood in the dimly lit lab, the artifact glowed faintly on the table, pulsating with an eerie energy that seemed to resonate with the very shadows we were fighting against. I leaned closer, tracing the intricate carvings on its surface with my fingers. "Luca," I called out, glancing over my shoulder at him, "this is it. I can feel it. This frequency could be our key." Luca, still skeptical, crossed his arms. "You really think we can communicate with them? What if it just makes things worse?" His brow furrowed in concern, and I could see the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "I understand your hesitation," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "But we've seen what they can do. We need to know what they want. This artifact might help us understand their behavior." He sighed, finally uncrossing his arms. "Okay, Alessandra. Let's say you're right. What's the plan?" I could see a flicker of curiosity in his eyes, and I knew we were on the same page. "We'll set up a controlled environment, lure them in with the artifact, and observe their reactions. If they respond to the frequency, we might learn how to contain them." Luca nodded slowly, clearly weighing the risks. "It's risky, but we don't have many options left. Let's get everything ready." As we prepared for the operation, the tension in the air crackled. I checked the equipment, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and fear. "Are you ready for this?" I asked, catching his gaze. "Ready as I'll ever be," he replied, a hint of a smile breaking through his stern demeanor. "Just remember, if things go south, we retreat. No heroics." "Deal," I said, feeling a surge of adrenaline. When the night came, we found ourselves in an open area far from the chaos of the city. I placed the artifact on the ground, its glow intensifying in the darkness. Moments later, shadows began to swirl around us, coalescing into distinct shapes. "Look!" I whispered, my breath hitching in my throat. Just then, a massive shadow figure emerged from the darkness, towering over the others. I felt a chill run down my spine as it seemed to study us, its presence both threatening and strangely intelligent. "Luca," I breathed, "this is more than we expected." "I can see that," he replied, his voice low and tense. "We need to stay focused. Remember the plan." But as the shadows surged forward, I realized we were losing control. The atmosphere shifted. What had started as a calculated operation was spiraling into chaos. As we stumbled away from the chaos, my heart raced, the adrenaline coursing through my veins like wildfire. Luca and I ducked behind a concrete barrier, our breaths coming in sharp gasps. The shadows had surged like a tide, overwhelming everything in their path, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we had only scratched the surface of their true nature. "What the hell was that?" Luca exclaimed, his voice a mix of frustration and awe. We were completely unprepared. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to gather my thoughts. It was unlike anything we've encountered. That massive shadow, it felt different. Almost intelligent. Luca shot me a skeptical glance. Intelligent? You mean it was aware of us? Exactly. It moved with purpose. We need to analyze its behavior further, I replied, my mind racing with possibilities. If we can understand its motivations, we might be able to find the source of these shadows. He nodded, his expression softening. But how do we do that? We've seen that they're drawn to fear. What if we're missing something deeper? As we crouched in the dim light, I realized that we could no longer ignore our own fears. Maybe we need to confront our own emotions, I suggested. Understand what we're afraid of. It might give us insight into the shadow's existence. Luca looked at me, his brow furrowing. You think our fears are connected to whatever is creating these shadows? It's worth a try, I replied, feeling a strange sense of camaraderie with him. We can't keep running from the darkness. We need to face it. He sighed, a mix of resignation and determination in his eyes. All right. Let's do it. But you first. I took a deep breath, the weight of my past crashing over me like a wave. When I was a child, I lost my younger brother in an accident. I always felt that I should have protected him, that I failed in my duty. Luca's gaze softened. That's a heavy burden to carry. I can't imagine. And what about you? I pressed gently. What haunts you? He hesitated, the shadows of his past flickering in his eyes. I lost men in combat, Alessandra. I always replay their faces in my mind, wondering if I could have saved them. It's like a ghost that never leaves. Before I could respond, a sudden commotion erupted outside the barrier, breaking our moment of connection. We exchanged worried glances, and my gut twisted as I realized we were not alone. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted one of our trusted military allies, Colonel Ferraro, approaching with a determined stride. Alessandra, Luca, he called, his voice urgent. We need to regroup. There's something you both need to see. I felt a chill run down my spine. Something in his tone set alarm bells off in my head. As we stood to follow him, I couldn't shake the feeling that Ferraro was hiding something, and my instinct screamed at me that we were on the brink of uncovering a betrayal that could change everything. The darkness was deeper than we realized, and the shadows were not the only threats lurking in the chaos. The chaos in the command center was palpable. I felt the weight of betrayal pressing down on me like a dark fog, thick and suffocating. Captain Luca Moretti and I stood side by side, our eyes darting around as shouts erupted from the military personnel who had once trusted our ally. We need to get out of here, Alessandra, Luca urged, his voice steady despite the tumult around us. I nodded, my heart racing. We can't let him unleash the shadows. If he does, it could mean disaster for everyone. Just as I spoke, a loud crash echoed through the hall, and I spun around to see a group of soldiers storming in, weapons raised. Follow me! Luca shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward a side exit. We sprinted through the maze of corridors, the sound of chaos fading slightly as we made our way outside. The cool night air hit my face, a stark contrast to the heated fear inside the command center. Where do we go now? I asked, panting as we reached the edge of the base. There's an underground network of scientists and researchers in Florence, he replied, urgency in his tone. They've been tracking the shadows for years. If anyone can help us, it's them. As we ran toward the rendezvous point, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread settling deep within me. Do you think they'll believe us? We have no proof of the betrayal or the impending attack. Luca stopped for a moment, looking directly into my eyes. They will believe us because we're not just talking about shadows anymore. We're talking about lives at stake. We have to convince them to help us. Finally, we reached the hideout, a nondescript building tucked away in an alley. The door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room filled with scattered papers and old equipment. A few scientists looked up, their expressions a mix of curiosity and concern. Dr. Romano? Captain Moretti, one of them asked hesitantly. We need your help, I said, my voice shaking slightly. We've uncovered a plot that could endanger countless lives. Our ally has turned against us, and he plans to harness the shadows to manipulate political factions. The room fell silent, the weight of my words sinking in. After a moment, the lead scientist stepped forward. We've been waiting for someone to come to us. We've seen the shadows grow stronger, but we didn't have the means to fight back. As we shared our knowledge and insights, I could feel a spark of hope igniting within me. Together, we would devise a plan to counter the betrayal and save those at risk. This was no longer just about shadows, it was about humanity's survival. In that moment, I realized that despite the looming darkness, we had the power to unite against it. And united, we would stand a chance. The tension in the air was palpable as I faced our former ally, Commander Valenti. His eyes, once filled with camaraderie, now gleamed with a manic determination. You don't understand, Alessandra. The shadows are the key to power. With them under my control, we could reshape the world, he spat, his voice thick with desperation. Control them? You're playing with forces you don't comprehend. I shot back, my heart racing. Beside me, Luca stood firm, his jaws set. You think you can harness fear and anger? You'll only unleash chaos. Valenti laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the dimly lit command center. Chaos? That's exactly what I want. The world is weak, and I will show them true strength. He waved a dismissive hand, and I felt the shadows around us stir, dark tendrils writhing as if they were alive. Luca, we need to expose his plan, I urged, glancing at him. I could see the gears turning in his mind, the strategy forming. We can't let him succeed. If we reveal what he's done, maybe we can disrupt this madness. Stay close, he whispered, edging forward. I'll handle this. Before I could respond, a shadow surged from the corner of the room, swirling ominously toward Valenti. No! No! He screamed, realization dawning too late. The shadows, once his tools, now turned against him, enveloping him in an inky whirlwind. I stumbled back, my breath hitching as the darkness coiled around him, swallowing his cries. Alessandra, we have to go! Luca shouted, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the exit. As we ran, I cast one last glance back. Valenti's form was disappearing into the abyss, his ambition consumed by the very fears he sought to control. Outside, the night air felt different, charged with a strange energy. I looked at Luca, my heart still racing from the confrontation. We need to understand what just happened. The shadows, they're not just monsters. They're a reflection of us. Luca nodded, his expression serious. We've seen what fear can do. If we don't find a way to manage this, the shadows will continue to haunt us. In the days that followed, the chaos began to settle. News spread of our confrontation, and I was hailed as a hero for my insights and bravery. Luca received a promotion for his leadership, but the accolades felt hollow amidst the uncertainty. We've only scratched the surface, I said, gazing out at the city, now lit by the soft glow of dawn. We need to create a framework to understand these shadows, to teach people that fear doesn't have to define us. We can learn to coexist. Luca placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. Together, we can forge a new path. This is just the beginning. As we stood side by side, I felt a sense of resolve wash over me. The shadows may always lurk in the corners of our minds, but with understanding and unity, we could learn to face them not as enemies, but as a part of our collective journey toward healing.